How do we protect our assets if somebody goes into a care facility, a nursing home? And I get calls like this all the time. You may have heard me on WCBM, we're on 9 to 10 a.m., or WBAL, we're on from 12:30 to 1. CBM is on Sunday, BAL is on Saturday. And people will ask me this question, Aunt Molly's in a nursing home, isn't it too late? My answer is no, as long as you have the power of attorney. And Aunt Molly has, I'm going to make it real simple, $400,000. If you do nothing, you can keep for Aunt Molly $2,500. You can bury Aunt Molly, they let you prepay that. And beyond that, you're pretty well out of luck. If you had a house, they put a lien on it. So my question is, what do we do with the remaining $390,000? Well, I'll tell you what we do. We give you $390,000. That triggers a penalty. Aunt Molly would then be ineligible for approximately, and I'm making this number up, 56 months, because you're penalized for every $6,800 we give you, 1 month of ineligibility. And you say, but that's a stupid plan. If I have to pay for 56 months, there's not going to be much left. But what happens is Andrea restores to Aunt Molly's account $6,800 a month. So our 56-month penalty becomes 55, another $6,800, 54, 53, until we reach a point about halfway through when you'll be able to retain for her benefit approximately $200,000. And you will have spent $190,000 on the care facility. The choice is yours. Which would you rather do? I ask you, your first name?
Sonia.
Sonia. Would you rather spend $390,000 on Aunt Molly's cost of care or protect $200,000? Which would you rather do? Spend it all or protect something? Yeah, I mean, most people would protect something. I've had people say to me, well, how can you tell people to do this and whatever? My view is that's what I do for a living. I try to protect money. Your job is to make sure that the money is there for Aunt Molly's benefit. Because what I want is to make certain if she needs dental work, if she needs dentures, you name it, you have the ability to purchase it. But the choice is always yours. So that is the case of a single person. We call it half a loaf strategy. You can always protect with a power of attorney and good planning half of the assets. You can protect even more if you now have VA benefits that help defray some of that cost. They all work together. The best strategy that you can employ is when you're a husband and wife. Anybody here married?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a married couple. Names? Yvette and Durbin. Yvette and Durbin. I've never had a Durbin in all my years. So it's new. Hey, Durbin. But Durbin, we're putting you in the care facility. So it's statistically the men go first. Actually, the women are the caregivers. So Durbin's in the care facility. And under Medicaid law, first thing again is Yvette. We have a house, 2 cars, and $400,000. First thing we do is the house goes in Yvette's name, fully protected under Maryland Medicaid law. And the minute you get you on Medicaid, you could sell the house and ride off into the sunset. It's protected. The 2 cars are protected. She hates Durbin's car. If she's like my wife hates my car and wouldn't drive it. But I don't want you to sell it too quickly because they're exempt assets, the 2 cars. And what we'll do is once we get Durbin on Medicaid, you can sell his vehicle and keep the proceeds. So now we're doing good. We got the house protected. We've got the car protected. And we have $390,000. And I'm going to show you how to protect the entire amount. How do I get to $390,000? I pay actually 400. Durbin's going to keep 2,000, although he's allowed to keep 2,500. We're giving him 2. And we have 398,000. You get to keep 110. So now we're at 288,000. So we're making some progress, right? We've got some money protected. What do we do next? Well, if you have any debt, and I'm going to pretend you have a HELOC, home equity line of credit, for $28,000, and we're going to pay that off. We can pay debt. That's a protected asset. We're now down to 270. What do we do with 270? Well, we could spend it all in the care facility, or we can make you queen for a day. Most of you aren't old enough to remember Jack Bailey, and my mother cried every time these ladies would be queen for a day. Well, Yvette's smiling, not crying, because we're going to fix up your house. Washer, dryer, refrigerator, new water heater. We're going to spend 20 grand on the house. So you can have that big wide screen that Durbin always wanted. Nothing for Durbin, all for Yvette. So we're down to 250. She's having fun, folks. She could buy a new car, but she doesn't want a car. Nobody buys new cars at that point. Now, once in a while, if somebody was a clunker, we will buy a new car. But in this case, you have fairly good cars. So what do we do with the 250? Well, we have a couple other fun things that we can do. Yvette is having fun, you see. We paid our debt. We can prepay burials. Isn't that fun? 10,000 for each burial. We're now down to 230. And if you don't have a burial plot, you can buy one. You can have one plot with one lot for each of you. If you have 2 plots and 1 lot each, you're okay. Got to help you if you have 1 plot with 2 lots and another plot. You'll be ineligible for Medicaid. And if that doesn't confound you, nothing will. I always tell the story of my dad's lot in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. It wasn't almost heaven, folks. I used to call it the armpit of America. It really was not my favorite place. I had to go see my grandmother every month, and it had one of those paper factories. It smelled terrible. Well, my dad was to be buried. I went to look for his grave. He was on the middle of a hill, and that's where it was. And I told my cousin, you take the gravesite away, or I'm giving it to the poor people, and we have 1 plot and 1 lot in Florida. Now, we have $230,000, and there's one last chance. Now, I want to tell everybody either watching this or here in the room that with that $230,000, you have one choice. You either spend it on care, and we can protect half of it, or we can give it to somebody like our prior presenter. And we give them this money, and they buy for you, Yvette, a thing called an immediate annuity. And what that does is return the principal and interest over 5 years to Yvette. And it converts an eligible resource into a different category. This is just a technical category called income. Folks, this does not work in Delaware, New Jersey, Florida. It works here in Maryland. Do not transport this outside of this state. Every state is different. And in certain states, this will not work. But here in Maryland, we can protect every nickel. And it takes about 90 days. What's the one tool we need, folks? Power of attorney with gift giving. If you have that Durbin, we're home free. Or at least Yvette is home free. And reality is that I feel by the way, Barbara Mikulski was responsible for this part of the law. Because women were losing everything if you pedal back to when these laws went into effect. Now we can protect assets, and I am very proud of working with this area of the law to help people so they can carry on their lives in some semblance of comfort. And that's how you do Medicaid planning. Do not try this on your own. It's very, very complicated. There are a lot of tax ramifications. Now, we'll take a breath. We go to tax planning. See, if you didn't lose it to long-term care, the next area is tax. Now, I must tell everybody, most people watching this or being in this audience will not have major federal estate tax problems. The threshold for you to have a federal estate tax problem is $5,120,000. So we're worried about it. And I'll make it even better. If they did have $5,120,000 and Durbin passed away and passed everything to Yvette, she could take his credit of $5,120,000 and stack it on top of hers. You'd have $10,240,000. There aren't many people that are impacted federally. That's federal law. But where you get impacted is the state of Maryland. If your estate is over $1 million, and that will include your life insurance, your retirement plans, your investments, everything you have, you get hit with a 16% tax. And if you have a $1.5 million estate and you're a single person, you're looking for, and you're not going to pay it, are you? It's going to be the kids or family. It's going to hit us to the tune of about $60,000. Now let's take Durbin and Yvette, and I'm going to give you each $1 million. Yes, I'm Jack Bailey here. Queen for a day, king for a day. They each have $1 million. If Durbin left Yvette the $1 million, there's no tax, as long as you're U.S. citizens. You can leave money to each other. But then we have Yvette with $2 million. And if she passes away, her kids will pay $100,000 in taxes. So what we do for Durbin or Yvette, we write a document called a disclaimer trust will. And here's how it goes. It says, if I, Durbin, pass away, I create a trust. And here's our trust, our empty bottle. And I have nothing in it. If Yvette elects, she can say, I don't want that life insurance from LifeBridge, I don't want any of my benefits, I'll let the $1 million go into this trust. But guess who controls it? You do, Yvette. And this is exempt from further taxation. That one move, because the document is written correctly, will save your kids $100,000 when you pass away. Now, I've had people say, I don't care about my kids, they're getting $1.9 million. That's fine. But if you're like me, I have a choice to my kids or to the state or state government. I choose my kids every day. Now, you may be different. And if you don't have lineal heirs, I mean, if you have far out relatives, you may not care. I would probably not opt for the trust if I didn't have kids. But you put it in there so the choice is made by the survivor for up to 9 months after death. I had somebody die, they called me today, I said, let's get you in. We have to make this decision, do we fund the trust? This man's wife lived for 20 plus years with Lou Gehrig's disease. One of the longest lived persons ever, I can assure you. She just passed away, mercifully, and we have to decide whether to fund the trust. But they don't have kids, so as a result, we may not fund it. I was talking to him on the phone. I said, maybe we won't do it, Bill. We'll do something else. But these are things that we can do and decide post-mortem after someone dies. I think where the game, now, if you're a single person, the only way you can save taxes would be to give your $1 million. Let's say you had $2 million. You could give $1 million to the kids. Hope you live 3 years and avoid the state of Maryland tax. Now, I get some clients that will do that. If they're getting older and they're in their mid-80s and they don't need all the money, at that point, maybe give it away. If you're in your 50s or 60s, I doubt that you would be willing to give it away. I wouldn't advise you to do that. It's all dependent on getting to know you and the facts. Where the game is played, in my opinion, is how you leave money to your kids. How many of you would be comfortable leaving a 21-year-old $250,000 out? Well, you can hear the grumbling. Read your document. A lot of people will have grown children. I do. And your document says, I leave Megan and Lindsay, my daughters, their money outright and free of trust, or their descendants per stirpes. Well, I've got a granddaughter who's 4 months old. That little baby would get that money if my daughter died at age 21. Not good planning. The tool I use is called a generation skipping bloodline trust. Here's how it works. Andrea and Helen are my kids. I leave you each $500,000. It's now in trust. Helen oversees her trust. Andrea oversees her trust. Why do I do it that way? Well, first of all, it never is included in your estate for tax purposes. So it skips you tax-wise. 2, if you get divorced, your spouse cannot attack it. Most people love that one. The one I like is if one of you dies. Let's say, Helen, you had no children. If something happened to you, but you're married, it would go to your spouse. That I wouldn't like. I want it to go back to Andrea. So what it says, it's there for your life, but when you pass away, it goes back to Andrea and down Andrea's line. Keeps it in the bloodlines. It also protects us if one of them gets sued. If you had a lawsuit against you, they can't attack that. Now, we saw a lot of this in this most recent downturn. There were a ton of foreclosures. And people who had these kind of trusts, it reminds me of a case of a woman whose husband was a dentist. Now, we think about dentists. This guy was earning over $1 million a year till 2008. What happened in 2008? Cosmetic dentistry went the way of the telephone booth. It was gone, and this guy lost 2/3 of his business because dentists started keeping some of that, and people didn't have extra money to have cosmetic dentistry. Well, he had to go into bankruptcy, and luckily the money that was left to her by her mother was in one of these protective trusts, and they couldn't get at it because they were very worried. So it puts a protective seal around the assets. It also protects in the event somebody is bipolar, has a disability, special needs. You'll see some things that I've handed out on special needs trust. It is a protective vehicle. A lot of people get MS and other illnesses as they go on later in life. A lot of times we don't know that a youngster who's 15, 16, 17 is about in their mid-20s to develop bipolar as an illness. It's a disease. So you have all these things that can happen, and you put a protective seal. And make matters even better, if you ever needed long-term care, it's not an eligible resource and never subject to spending down in a care facility. I highly recommend it for all my clients that are leaving appreciable assets to their family. Why? For the reasons that I mentioned. It's a protective vehicle. I don't think most of you will have big tax problems. I will tell you the one area that any of you working for LifeBridge or any major organization will have a problem with, and that is income tax. How you designate your beneficiary. I had a fellow call me up today, he was 94, and he said, I've named my estate as the beneficiary of my IRAs. And I said, big mistake, because you're going to pay a tax all at once. Either name your kids or name some vehicle that allows the family to stretch the payment of these retirement accounts. So you will, in doing your estate planning, you'll be confronted with these issues. And finally, as you're doing it, you should take a look at all your insurance holdings. You may want to transition some of your life insurance to long-term care. I dropped my disability insurance as I hit 60. Why? Because it would not cover me to any great extent. I was better off taking the same premium dollars and buying long-term care coverage. And the key in long-term care coverage, take a little less, but put an inflation factor in there. And if you can get it, and it's very important to get it while your health holds out, what you do is buy a policy called shared care. And that means that if you need it, you can use your policy, and then when you go into a care facility and go through the 3 years, you can use your spouse's. Hey, thank you very much. I know we're limited.